The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched vast and imposing, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from the insectoid to the ethereal. At the human section, Ambassador Tae-min stood quietly, his dark suit a stark contrast to the elaborate garments worn by other diplomats. Beside him, Hyun-woo kept his hands clasped behind his back, his military bearing evident despite wearing civilian clothes. Ji-won sat with her tablet, taking notes on the proceedings with practiced efficiency. The session had been routine until High Executor Vrath of the Velthran Empire stood. His species towered at nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in thick, armor-like hide that had evolved over millions of years on a harsh world. Vrath's voice boomed across the chamber, demanding immediate attention from all present. The translation devices worked overtime to convert his harsh, guttural language into something the other species could understand. The Velthran Empire demands the immediate surrender of the human colony on Kepler 442b, Vrath declared, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of dominance. This world falls within our historical territory. These newcomers have no right to it. Tae-min rose slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. He had prepared for this moment, knowing the Velthran had been eyeing the mineral-rich planet for months. The colony there housed only 3,000 humans. But they had legally claimed the world under council law 5 years ago, when humanity first joined the galactic community. With respect, High Executor, Tae-min said, his voice steady and clear. The colony was established according to council regulations. All proper surveys were conducted. No prior claims existed in the database. The world is legally human territory. Vrath's hide flushed a deep purple, a sign of anger in his species. Around the chamber, other representatives watched with interest. Disputes were common, but usually resolved through trade agreements or diplomatic compromise. Humans were still new to galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. Most species viewed them as naive children playing at civilization. Legal. Vrath's laugh was like grinding stone. You speak of law? Your species has existed in space for barely a moment. The Velthran Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. We do not ask permission from prey animals. The chamber went silent. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. The insult was clear and deliberate. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened, but he remained motionless. Ji-won stopped typing, her eyes fixed on Vrath. Tae-min simply nodded, as if considering the words carefully. I understand you are upset, Tae-min replied. However, when your empire joined this council, you agreed to follow its laws. As did we. The colony remains under human control. We come 79, 18-1. Week 18-1. Vrath descended from his platform, his massive form moving with surprising grace. He approached the human section, and several security drones activated, hovering nearby in case of violence. The Velthran stopped just short of the barrier separating the sections, staring down at Tae-min with undisguised contempt. Your species is soft, Vrath said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous than a shout. Weak. Short-lived. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. You evolved on a gentle world and know nothing of true strength. You are children playing with toys you do not understand. Tae-min met his gaze without flinching. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the human ambassador smiled, a small expression that somehow carried weight in the vast chamber. Something about that smile made several nearby species take notice. It was not the smile of someone afraid. It was the smile of someone who knew something others did not. If you believe we are so weak, Tae-min said quietly, then you should have no fear of proving it. Vrath's eyes widened slightly. Around the chamber, a ripple of surprise moved through the gathered representatives. The ancient keeper of laws, a crystalline being whose species had founded the council millennia ago, rose from its position. Ambassador Tae-min, the keeper's voice chimed like glass bells. Are you aware of what you are suggesting? I am invoking the right of combat trial, Tae-min said clearly. his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. As is my right under council law, when diplomacy fails and insult is given. The chamber erupted. Representatives from dozens of species began talking at once. The right of combat trial was ancient, rarely used, considered barbaric by most modern civilizations. It allowed two species to settle disputes through ritualized warfare when all other methods failed. The last time it had been invoked was over 300 galactic cycles ago, before most current species had even achieved spaceflight. Vrath stared at the human, then threw back his head and laughed. The sound was mocking, filled with genuine amusement. You? Challenge the Velthrin? We are born warriors. Our children fight before they can walk. We have crushed civilizations that had warships when your ancestors were still climbing trees. Then you accept? Taman asked simply. The laughter stopped. Vrath's expression hardened. He could not refuse now without losing honor before the entire council. The trap had been set and sprung with just a few words. The High Executor straightened to his full height, his forearms crossing over his chest in the Velthrin gesture of formal acceptance. I accept, Vrath declared. In 30 rotations, we shall meet in the trial grounds, 50 of my warriors against 50 of yours. We shall teach the galaxy what happens to prey that forgets its place. The Keeper of Laws activated the official recording systems. Let it be recorded. The Velthrin Empire and humanity shall engage in combat trial. Standard rules apply. Lethal force is authorized. The victor claims the disputed territory and all associated rights. May wisdom guide the worthy. As the session dissolved into chaos, representatives scrambling to send messages to their homeworlds, Hyunwoo leaned close to Taemin. His voice was barely a whisper, but Ji-won caught it too. They both saw the same expression on their ambassador's face. They have no idea what they just did, Hyunwoo said. Taemin nodded slowly. Send the message to Earth Command. Tell them to wake up the veterans. All of them. Ji-won looked up from her tablet, where she had already pulled up humanity's military history files. Thousands of years of warfare, millions of conflicts, billions of deaths. Humans fighting humans in every possible environment, with every possible weapon, using every possible tactic. No other species in the galaxy had anything like it. They had fought aliens, sure, but they had spent millennia fighting each other first. Should I send the full historical package to the team? She asked. Yes, Taemin replied. Let them see what humans really are. Let them understand the difference between a species that learned to fight and a species that had to learn to survive. As they left the chamber, Vrath was already celebrating with his entourage, confident in his coming victory. He did not notice the way other species looked at the humans. Some with pity, yes, but others with something else. The older species, the ones who had studied Earth's transmissions, who had read human literature and history, they looked at the humans with something that might have been concern. Not for humanity, but for the Velthrin. One ancient diplomat, whose species had observed 10,000 wars across the galaxy, whispered to its aide, "Those fools just challenged a species whose own planet has over 10,000 words for war, in one language alone." The aide did not understand. But in 30 rotations, the entire galaxy would. Earth's military headquarters buzzed with activity. In a secured bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, 50 of humanity's finest warriors gathered. They came from every branch, every nation, every specialty. Sujin arrived first, her pilot uniform still bearing the insignia from the Titan colony defense. She had flown combat missions against pirate raiders and knew spacecraft like she knew her own heartbeat. Min Ho came next, a sergeant whose face carried the scars of 3 separate campaigns. His file listed him as infantry. But that simple word did not capture what he really was. He was a survivor who had learned to make others not survive. Jae-hee set up her medical station in the corner, her movements efficient and practiced. She was listed as a combat medic, But her secondary role as tactical analyst made her invaluable. She could read a battlefield like others read books, seeing patterns and possibilities where others saw only chaos. Da-un, the naval commander, stood reviewing holographic displays of the trial grounds. Her specialty was coordination, making sure 50 individual warriors fought as one lethal organism. Ji-won stood at the front of the room as the last warriors filed in. She waited until all 50 were present, then activated the main display. Images of Velthran warriors filled the screens, their impressive physical forms on full display. 8 feet tall, 4 arms, armored hide, faster reflexes than humans, greater strength. The list of their advantages was long and intimidating. "This is what the galaxy sees," Ji-won said. "This is what they expect will kill us in the first hour of combat." She changed the display. Now it showed Velthran battle tactics, recorded from their numerous campaigns. They favored frontal assaults, overwhelming force, direct confrontation. Their warriors were trained from birth in honor combat, dueling, and formation warfare. They had crushed 17 species in military conflicts over the last 2 centuries. "This is how they fight," Ji-won continued. "Notice anything?" Minho spoke up from his seat. "They are predictable. Every battle follows the same pattern. Charge, overwhelm, dominate." "Exactly." Ji-won nodded. "They are warriors born and bred. Fighting is in their culture, their religion, their identity. They are very good at what they do." She changed the display again. This time, it showed human history. Battlefields from every era flashed across the screen. Ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons. Medieval sieges lasting years. Trenches filled with mud and blood. Cities bombed to rubble. Guerrilla fighters hiding in jungles. Special forces raids in the dead of night. Naval battles, air combat, tank warfare, cyber attacks. On and on the images went. A litany of human violence that spanned 10,000 years. "This is what we are," Ji-won said softly. "We are not a warrior species. We are a survivor species that learned to weaponize everything, including ourselves. The Velthran have fought 17 species in 200 years. Humans fought themselves in 17 separate conflicts just in the 20th century alone. We have perfected warfare, not against aliens, but against each other. We know every trick because we invented most of them." The room was silent. These warriors knew their history, but seeing it laid out like this drove home a truth the galaxy did not understand. Humans were not warriors who occasionally fought. They were fighters who occasionally stopped to breathe. Sujin raised her hand. "What are the trial rules?" Da-un stepped forward to answer. 50 warriors per side. Combat continues until one side is eliminated or surrenders. The arena is a designated planet with varied terrain. Forests, mountains, plains, and some urban ruins left from a dead civilization. We can bring standard equipment. Weapons, armor, supplies, and support technology are allowed within limits. No orbital support, no reinforcements. "Time limit?" Minho asked. "Officially, none. The trial continues until resolution. Historically, most lasted 3 to 7 days. Hyun-woo entered the room, followed by Tae-min. The ambassador looked tired, but determined. He had spent the last few days handling the political aftermath of the challenge. Across the galaxy, species were placing bets. The odds heavily favored the Velthran. Humanity was offered at 50 to 1 in most gambling houses. Some species had sent messages of sympathy, already mourning Earth's coming loss. "I will not lie to you," Tae-min said, addressing the assembled warriors. "The galaxy expects us to lose. They see the Velthran as unstoppable warriors. They see us as weak newcomers. Even some of our allies have quietly suggested we surrender the colony rather than waste 50 lives in a pointless fight." He paused, looking at each warrior in turn. "But they do not understand what we are. They think war is about strength and honor. They think it is about who has the biggest weapons or the thickest armor. They are wrong. Taemin gestured to the displays still showing human history. War is about adaptation. It is about using every advantage, exploiting every weakness, and refusing to quit, no matter how bad things look. It is about surviving when survival seems impossible. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. 5. The warriors listened intently. These were not speeches meant to inspire false hope. These were simple facts, delivered plainly. They were about to enter combat against a species bred for war, and they needed to understand their own strengths. "You have 30 rotations to prepare," Hyunwoo said, taking over the briefing. "We will train for every scenario. The Velthrin will expect honorable combat. We will give them warfare. They will expect direct confrontation. We will give them shadows and uncertainty. They will expect warriors. We will give them something they have never seen before. Humans. Fighting for survival." Over the following weeks, the training was intense. Minho drilled his infantry units in guerrilla tactics, ambush techniques, and asymmetric warfare. They practiced disappearing into terrain, setting traps, and striking from unexpected angles. Sujin worked with her drone operators, creating reconnaissance networks that would map the battlefield in real time. The Velthrin had scouts, but they were warriors who scouted. Humans had technology that scouted, while warriors fought. Jae-hee analyzed every scrap of data on Velthrin physiology. She found their weaknesses: joints between armor plates, sensory organs vulnerable to specific frequencies, behavioral patterns that could be exploited. The Velthrin were strong, but strength meant nothing if you could not catch your enemy. They were tough, but toughness meant nothing if you did not know where the attack would come from. The warriors bonded during those weeks. They shared stories around tables during brief rest periods. Minho talked about fighting in the frozen mountains of Titan, where human adaptability had been the only thing keeping them alive against pirate raiders who had better weapons. Sujin described dogfights in asteroid fields, where millisecond reactions meant the difference between life and death. Each story was a lesson. Humans won, not because they were stronger, but because they refused to lose. News from the council station reported that the Velthrin were training in traditional ways: honor duels, formation drills, strength exercises. Vrath gave interviews boasting about his warriors' prowess, describing in detail how they would crush the human challenge. He spoke of honor, glory, and the warrior's path. Other species watched these interviews with respect. The Velthrin were everything a warrior species should be. What they did not see were the human training sessions. Those were classified, hidden from galactic view. If they had seen them, they might have understood. They might have seen Minho teaching his squad to move silently through forests, leaving no trace. They might have seen Jae-hee running psychological warfare simulations, learning how to break an enemy's will before breaking their body. They might have seen Dayun coordinating complex multi-unit operations where 50 individuals moved as one perfect machine. On the final day before departure to the trial grounds, Taemin visited the warriors one last time. They were checking equipment, making final preparations, saying quiet goodbyes to loved ones via video messages. The ambassador watched them with something like pride mixed with sorrow. He had sent these people to war with his words in the council chamber. "Do you regret accepting the challenge?" Ji-won asked, standing beside him. Taemin was quiet for a moment. "I regret that it was necessary. But no, I do not regret the choice. The Velthrin would have taken the colony by force eventually, council law or not. This way, we show the galaxy who we are. We show them that humanity is not prey. What if we lose? We will not lose. Not because we are stronger, not because we are tougher, but because we are human, and humans are very good at surviving the impossible." As the warriors boarded the transport ship that would take them to the trial grounds, Minho paused at the ramp. He looked back at Earth, hanging beautiful and blue against the black of space. His squad gathered around him, waiting for his words. "Remember," he said quietly, "they have won battles. We have survived wars. Show them the difference." The transport lifted away, carrying 50 humans toward a confrontation the galaxy would never forget. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. Ahead of them, the Velthrin prepared for what they thought would be an easy victory. And in between, the rest of the galaxy placed their bets. Certain they knew how this story would end. They were wrong. The trial world had no name, only a designation. Arena 7. It was a planet maintained by the Council specifically for combat trials, though none had been held here in 3 centuries. The world featured every type of terrain: dense forests that blocked sensors, mountain ranges with countless hiding spots, open plains where speed mattered, and ruins of some long-dead civilization that provided urban combat environments. Council observers established their monitoring station in orbit, their sensors and cameras ready to broadcast the trial across the galaxy. Billions of beings tuned in to watch. For most species, this was entertainment mixed with curiosity. How long would the humans last? Would they show courage in defeat? Some hoped for a good show. Others simply wanted to witness history, to see the newest species in the galactic community tested in the old way. The Velthrin arrived first, their transport ship landing on the plains with deliberate ceremony. Vrath led his 50 warriors down the ramp, their armor gleaming in the planet's twin suns. Each warrior stood over 8 feet tall, carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in museums. Energy blades that hummed with power, plasma cannons that could melt through starship hulls, and shields that could withstand tremendous impact. They formed ranks, chanting their war songs, beating their weapons against their shields. The sound was impressive, meant to intimidate. It had worked on 16 previous species. The human transport landed quietly a kilometer away, in a forested region. No ceremony marked their arrival. No war songs echoed across the plains. The warriors simply exited in pairs, moving with efficient purpose. They wore adaptive camouflage armor that shifted colors to match their surroundings. Their weapons looked almost primitive compared to Velthrin technology. Chemical propellant rifles, explosive devices, blades, and compact drones. Minho organized his units quickly, hand signals coordinating movement. Within minutes, the humans had vanished into the forest. The Council Keeper's voice echoed across the planet, broadcast through atmospheric speakers. "The combat trial begins now. May wisdom guide the worthy." That, Vrath did not hesitate. He led his warriors in a direct march toward the forest where the humans had disappeared. This was the Velthrin way. Find the enemy. Engage the enemy. Destroy the enemy. Honor demanded direct confrontation. Their sensors picked up traces of human presence in the trees ahead. The Velthrin increased their pace, eager for the fight to begin. They entered the forest in formation, weapons ready, shields active. The forest was dense, with thick vegetation blocking sight lines beyond 30 meters, perfect ambush territory. But the Velthrin were confident. Their armor could withstand most small arms fire. Their strength allowed them to push through any obstacle. Their training prepared them for close combat, where they held every advantage. The first human they saw was Minho, standing alone in a small clearing ahead. He held no weapon, simply watched them approach. Vrath raised his hand, stopping his warriors. This was strange. Why would a human present himself like this? "Surrender now," Vrath called out. "Your death serves no purpose." Minho smiled, said nothing, and dove behind a fallen log. Instantly, the forest exploded with gunfire. Not from where Minho had disappeared, but from 6 different directions. Human warriors hidden in the canopy, buried in the undergrowth, concealed behind trees opened fire simultaneously. The Velthrin shields flared as bullets struck them, but the weapons were wrong. They were not trying to penetrate the shields. They were targeting sensors, joints, exposed areas. 3 Velthrin dropped in the first seconds, struck in their sensory organs before their shields could adjust. The rest reacted with trained speed, returning fire with plasma weapons that turned trees to ash. But the humans were already gone, fading back into the forest like ghosts. The entire ambush had lasted 8 seconds. Vrath roared in anger. "After them! Do not let them escape!" His warriors charged forward, crashing through the undergrowth. They found nothing. No humans, no blood trail, no evidence anyone had been there, except for the spent shell casings scattered on the ground. The Velthrin regrouped. Their formation tighter now, more cautious. This was not how combat was supposed to work. Where was the honor in hiding? Where was the glory in running? Across the galaxy, observers leaned forward. This was unexpected. The humans had drawn first blood, not through superior strength, but through tactics the Velthrin seemed unprepared for. Betting odds began to shift slightly, though the Velthrin were still overwhelming favorites. The ambushes continued throughout the first day. Humans would appear, strike, and vanish. Sujin's drones mapped Velthrin movements from above, transmitting real-time data to human units. Daun coordinated attacks so that Velthrin always faced threats from unexpected directions. Jaehi analyzed their responses, finding patterns, identifying which warriors were leaders and which were followers. The Velthrin tried to adapt. They split into smaller groups, hoping to corner human units. But each time they divided, they found themselves facing coordinated assaults that seemed to come from nowhere. Humans used the terrain like it was part of their own bodies. They disappeared into shadows that should not hide anything. They attacked from angles that seemed impossible. By nightfall of the first day, the Velthrin had lost 15 warriors. The humans had lost 2, both in a failed ambush, where the Velthrin had managed to predict their attack pattern. The ratio shocked the galaxy. 15-2. Against the Velthrin. Against warriors who had crushed 17 species. Vrath made camp in an open area, reasoning that humans could not ambush what they could not hide from. He posted guards in all directions. Sensors running at maximum. His remaining 35 warriors were tired, frustrated, and beginning to doubt. This was not the glorious battle they had trained for. This was something else. Something they had no words for. In the forest, Minho gathered his units. 48 humans remained, tired but functional. They ate cold rations, drank water, checked their equipment. No fires, no lights, minimal communication. They had trained for this, fought like this before, against each other, in training exercises that simulated exactly this kind of warfare. "They will adapt," Jaehi said quietly, reviewing the day's combat data on her tablet. "They are learning to spread out, to watch for ambush sites. We cannot rely on the same tactics tomorrow." "Good," Minho replied. "We have other tactics." Sujin launched fresh drones for night reconnaissance. The small machines flew silently, their sensors watching the Velthrin camp from above. She noted their positions, their patrol patterns, their defensive arrangements. All of it was predictable, because all of it was based on defending against direct assault. They had no protocols for what was coming. At midnight, the humans struck. Not with bullets or explosives, but with sound. Speakers hidden around the Velthrin camp began broadcasting noises. Human laughter, whispering voices, footsteps, weapon fire, from random directions. The sounds were not loud, but they were constant, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The Velthrin guards reacted to each sound, spinning, firing at shadows, calling alerts. None found targets because there were no targets. Only recordings played through speakers. After 2 hours of this, when the Velthrin were exhausted and jumpy, the real attack came. Human snipers fired from extreme range, not trying to kill, but to wound. A shot through a Velthrin's leg, another through an arm, injuries that would slow them down, make them burdens on their comrades. The Velthrin returned fire, but the snipers were already gone, moved to new positions. By dawn of the second day, the Velthrin had not slept. They were exhausted, paranoid, seeing threats in every shadow. When they tried to move out, they found their path blocked by traps, concealed pits, tripwires connected to explosives, areas where the ground itself had been undermined to collapse under weight. Nothing was safe. Everywhere held potential death. Vrath realized with growing horror what was happening. This was not combat. This was hunting. The humans were not trying to defeat them in glorious battle. They were trying to break them down, wear them out, destroy their will to fight before destroying their bodies. This was warfare conducted with cold efficiency, designed to inflict maximum damage for minimum risk. In orbit, the Council observers watched in silence. The ancient ones among them recognized what they were seeing. This was not how most species fought. Most civilizations developed war as an extension of honor, territory disputes, or cultural conflicts. They had rules, traditions, methods that were passed down and refined. Humans had developed war as a survival tool, refined through centuries of fighting themselves. They had learned every possible way to kill, because they had tried every possible way to survive being killed. One observer, whose species had studied Earth's broadcasts for decades, spoke into the record. They are not warriors. They are survivors who learned to weaponize their own mortality. The Velthrin challenged the wrong species. By the end of Day 2, Velthrin numbers had dropped to 28. Human casualties remained at 2. The galaxy watched with growing fascination and fear. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak newcomers began reviewing their policies toward Earth. Others started calculating what it would mean to have these humans as allies rather than enemies. In the Velthrin camp, Vrath stared at his remaining warriors. They were the finest fighters his species produced, trained from birth, victorious in countless battles. And they were losing to a species that had been in space for barely 30 years. He tried to understand what had gone wrong, where his calculations had failed. The answer was simple but terrible. He had challenged a species that viewed war not as a path to glory, but as a tool for survival. And survival was something humans were very, very good at. The trial was far from over, but the outcome was becoming clear. The only question now was whether the Velthrin would realize it in time to surrender with some honor intact, or whether they would fight to the last warrior, learning too late that some challenges should never be made. Day 3 brought new horrors for the Velthrin warriors. They woke, if their sleepless night could be called rest, to find messages carved into the trees around their camp. Simple words in their own language. You cannot win. Go home. Surrender. The psychological impact was devastating. How had humans gotten so close without being detected? When had they done this? The carvings were fresh, made during the night. While Velthrin guards had been on duty, Youngji, the human psychological warfare specialist, watched from a concealed position through her scope. She had spent hours in the dark, moving between trees in the Velthrin camp perimeter, leaving those messages. It was risky, dangerous work, but the effect was exactly what she wanted. The Velthrin were not just fighting humans now. They were fighting their own fear. Sang-Woo lay motionless in a sniper position 2 kilometers from the Velthrin camp. He had been there for 6 hours, barely breathing, waiting. His rifle was a chemical propellant weapon, primitive by galactic standards, but it had advantages. No energy signature to detect. No power cells to run out. Just physics, chemistry, and patient skill. He watched through his scope as a Velthrin commander stepped away from the group to check their perimeter. The shot was impossibly long by Velthrin standards. For Sang-Woo, it was just another day at work. The rifle cracked once. 2 kilometers away, the Velthrin commander fell. A single round, having found the weak point in his neck armor. The other Velthrins spun, weapons raised, but there was nothing to shoot at. Sang-Woo was already moving, changing position, finding his next hiding spot. By the time Velthrin scouts reached his original position, Vrath gathered his remaining warriors. 28 had become 23 overnight. 5 had died not in glorious combat but from hidden traps, sniper fire, and 1 from a simple infection when a human weapon had contaminated a wound. The Velthrin had medicines, but human weapons were apparently coated with substances that made Velthrin healing difficult. This was warfare as science, as careful planning, as cold calculation. "We change tactics," Vrath announced. "No more defensive positions. We hunt them as they hunt us. We split into pairs, move fast, and engage any human contact immediately." It was a reasonable plan, showing that Vrath was capable of learning. Smaller groups would be harder to ambush. Pairs could cover each other. Mobility would make them unpredictable. It might have worked against most enemies. It did not work against humans. Dayun received the updated drone feeds showing Velthrin splitting into pairs and spreading across the arena. She immediately recognized the opportunity. Isolated pairs were vulnerable in ways that larger groups were not. She began coordinating human units, directing them toward Velthrin pairs with careful precision. Each human unit consisted of 4 warriors, giving them numerical advantage in any encounter. The first Velthrin pair died in a carefully prepared kill zone. Haywan, the field engineer, had spent the previous day creating improvised mines from captured Velthrin equipment and natural materials found in the ruins. When the Velthrin pair entered a narrow pass between 2 rock formations, the mines detonated from both sides. The explosion was not enough to penetrate their shields fully, but it stunned them long enough for Minho's unit to close in and finish the engagement in close combat. 2 more Velthrin dead, 0 human casualties. The pattern repeated across the arena. Velthrin pairs found themselves facing coordinated human teams that used the terrain, technology, and tactics that the Velthrin had no training to counter. By midday, 8 more Velthrin had fallen. Human losses remained at 2. In orbit, the betting houses stopped taking wagers. The odds had shifted so dramatically that no one would bet on the Velthrin anymore. Species across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as the supposedly inferior humans systematically dismantled a warrior race. Military analysts from a dozen civilizations began recording everything, studying human tactics, trying to understand how they made it look so easy. Night fell on day 3, and the humans made their boldest move yet. Da'un coordinated a night raid on the Velthrin camp. Humans had better night vision, an evolutionary adaptation from their predator ancestry. The Velthrin relied on artificial light enhancement, which could be countered. Youngji had used her drones to map every sensor array, every light source, every defensive position the Velthrin had established. At midnight, the attack began with electromagnetic pulses that disabled Velthrin sensors. Lights went dark. Night vision equipment failed. The Velthrin found themselves blind in darkness, while humans moved through the shadows like they were born in them. Sujin guided her team through the chaos with hand signals, their enhanced helmets showing them everything in green-lit clarity. They struck surgically, targeting specific Velthrin warriors, then withdrew before others could respond. The raid lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, 7 more Velthrin were dead or dying. The humans had lost 1 warrior, caught in close combat with a Velthrin who managed to grab him despite being blind. It was the only moment of true Velthrin combat success in 3 days. But it had cost them 7 warriors to take down 1 human. Day 4 began with only 8 Velthrin remaining. Vrath looked at his surviving warriors and saw defeat in their eyes. These were the finest fighters his species had produced, and they were beaten not by superior strength but by superior thinking. The humans had turned every Velthrin advantage into a disadvantage. Strength meant nothing if you could not catch your enemy. Armor meant nothing if the enemy attacked your weak points. Training meant nothing if the enemy used tactics you had never trained against. Across the galaxy, the conversation had changed. No one talked about human weakness anymore. Species began discussing whether humanity should be feared, whether they were too dangerous to remain in the Council. Some suggested restrictions on human military development. Others proposed alliances. Wanting these terrifying warriors, on their side, rather than against them. The human veterans among the watching species understood what others did not. Minho's tactics were not new or revolutionary. They were basic infantry doctrine, basic special operations procedures, basic military strategy. Any human who had served in Earth's military would recognize these methods. The reason they seemed so effective was not because humans were naturally superior. It was because humans had spent thousands of years perfecting these techniques against each other. Jae-hee reviewed the combat data and made a recommendation to Da-eun. We can end this today. The Velthrin are broken. They are fighting out of pride now, not strategy. We could overwhelm them in one coordinated strike. Da-eun considered this, then shook her head. No. We let them have one last battle. They are warriors. They deserve to face us directly before the end. No. It was a decision made from respect, not mercy. The Velthrin had fought bravely despite being completely outmatched. They deserved to die as warriors if they chose death over surrender. Minho agreed with the decision. His squad had taken the most casualties, had done the hardest fighting. If anyone had the right to demand immediate victory, it was him. Instead, he prepared his warriors for one final engagement. The message was delivered through official channels. The humans would meet the remaining Velthrin in the open plains at dawn of Day 5. Direct combat. Face to face. The way the Velthrin had originally expected. It was an offer of honor to an enemy who had shown courage even in defeat. Vrath received the message with mixed feelings. On one hand, this was what he had wanted from the beginning. Honest combat between warriors. On the other hand, he knew it was too late. The humans had proven themselves superior in every way that mattered. This final battle would be symbolic. A chance for the Velthrin to die with weapons in hand, rather than be hunted to extinction in the shadows. He gathered his 7 remaining warriors. Tomorrow we fight, as Velthrin should fight. Face to face. Weapon to weapon. We will not win, but we will show the galaxy that the Velthrin do not surrender, do not beg, do not hide. We die as warriors. His warriors raised their weapons in salute. They were exhausted, wounded, traumatized by 3 days of warfare unlike anything they had trained for. But they were still Velthrin. They would face death with honor. In the human camp, 47 warriors prepared for the final battle. They had lost 3 comrades over 4 days. Each death felt keenly, despite the lopsided victory. Minho spoke to his assembled units, his voice quiet but firm. Tomorrow we finish this. They want honorable combat, and we will give it to them. Not because we owe them anything, but because we are human, and we understand what it means to fight for something bigger than ourselves. The Velthrin challenged us, thinking we were weak. We showed them they were wrong. Now we show them we can be merciful even in victory. Sujin raised a question. What if they refuse to surrender even after we defeat them? Minho was silent for a moment. Then, we honor their choice. But we try. We show the galaxy that humanity fights when we must. But we do not enjoy killing. That is what separates us from monsters. The night passed slowly. Both sides prepared for battle, knowing that dawn would bring the end of the combat trial one way or another. Across the galaxy, billions of beings waited to see how this story would conclude. The humans had already won in every practical sense. What happened next would determine not just the fate of one colony world, but the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galactic community. Dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of final battle. The Velthrin stood ready to die with honor. The humans stood ready to offer mercy, and the galaxy watched. Learning a lesson about the species they had so badly underestimated, dawn broke over the plains of Arena 7 with clear skies and gentle winds. The open ground stretched flat for nearly a kilometer, offering no cover, no shadows, no tricks. This was the kind of battlefield the Velthrin understood. 8 warriors stood in formation, weapons ready, armor gleaming in the morning light. Vrath stood at their center, his 4 arms holding both blade and cannon. They had accepted that death was coming, Now they would face it with dignity. On the opposite side, 47 humans approached in loose formation. They moved differently now, not with the silent stalking of hunters but with the steady march of soldiers. Minho led his infantry at the front. Su Jin and her team flanked the sides. Da-un coordinated from the center. They carried their weapons openly, making no attempt to hide or deceive. This was to be honest combat, as requested. The Council observers in orbit focused every camera on the scene. Across the galaxy, billions watched. This was the moment that would define the trial. The final confrontation between species. The betting houses remained closed. There was no question about the outcome, only about what form it would take. Hyun-woo walked forward alone when the two forces were 50 meters apart. He carried no weapon, his hands visible and empty. He stopped halfway between the armies and spoke, his voice amplified by his helmet so both sides could hear clearly. His words were translated instantly for the galactic audience. "Warriors of the Velthrin Empire," Hyun-woo called out. "You have fought with courage. You have shown honor, even in defeat. Humanity offers you the choice to surrender now. Lay down your weapons, and no more of your people need to die. Your lives will be returned to your empire. No shame will be spoken against your names." The offer echoed across the battlefield. In orbit, diplomats from dozens of species leaned forward. This was unprecedented. In previous combat trials, the winning side typically pressed their advantage to total elimination. Offering surrender to the losing side was considered weak, a failure to complete the victory. But humans were doing it anyway, and something about the gesture carried weight that made it seem anything but weak. Vrath stepped forward from the Velthrin line. His voice was hoarse from days of combat, but his words were clear. "Human warrior. I am Vrath, High Executor of the Velthrin Empire. I led my people into this challenge with arrogance and ignorance. I thought your species weak. I thought your soldiers fragile. I was wrong." Redder, he paused, and for a moment, his massive form seemed to sag under the weight of defeat. "But the Velthrin do not surrender. We are warriors. We die with weapons in our hands. This is our way. This has always been our way." Hyun-woo nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. "I understand. Every species has its code, its honor. We will respect yours." He turned to walk back to the human lines, then stopped and looked back. "But know this. Choosing death, when life is offered, is not strength. It is waste. Your warriors could return home, could teach your people what they have learned here. Dead warriors teach nothing." The words hung in the air. Vrath stood motionless, processing them. Behind him, his 7 warriors waited for his command. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Across the galaxy, observers held their breath. Finally, Vrath raised his weapons. "We fight. May your warriors send us to our ancestors with honor." Hyun-woo walked back to the human lines. Minho gave the signal, and the humans advanced. They did not rush, did not charge. They walked forward at a steady pace, weapons raised but not firing. It was a strange attack, lacking the fury of battle rage or the efficiency of tactical assault. It was something else, a march of inevitability. The Velthrin opened fire first. Energy weapons carved through the air, striking human shields, forcing the advance to slow. But human shields, though inferior to Velthrin technology in some ways, had been specifically modified for this engagement. They channeled energy attacks, dispersed them, absorbed what could not be deflected. Humans pressed forward through fire that would have stopped most species. At 30 meters, the humans returned fire, not with massed volleys, but with precise shots. Sang-woo, positioned in the human rear, took careful aim. His first shot struck Vrath's energy cannon, destroying it. His second struck the blade in another Velthrin's hand, shattering it. The humans were not trying to kill yet. They were disarming, crippling, forcing the Velthrin to understand how outmatched they truly were. The Velthrin charged. It was what they knew, what their culture demanded. 8 warriors against 47. Crossing open ground, knowing they would die but refusing to die, standing still. It was magnificent in its futility, tragic in its courage. The galaxy watched warriors choosing death over wisdom, and some species understood for the first time that courage and intelligence were not the same thing. The battle lasted 8 minutes. The humans could have ended it faster, but they gave the Velthrin the fight they wanted. Each Velthrin was engaged by multiple humans, working in coordination. Sujin's team used non-lethal weapons first, trying to incapacitate rather than kill. When Velthrin warriors refused to stay down, when they rose again and again despite injuries, the humans made it quick and clean. Respect demanded no less. Vrath was the last standing. His armor was shattered, 3 of his 4 arms hung useless, and blood leaked from a dozen wounds. But he remained on his feet, blade raised in his one functional arm, facing Minho. The human sergeant stood 3 meters away, rifle lowered, not aiming at the Velthrin commander. "It is over," Minho said quietly. "You fought well. You can still choose life." Vrath laughed, the sound wet and painful. "You are more generous in victory than I would have been. Perhaps that is why you won. We, Velthrin, know only how to fight. You humans know when to fight and when to stop." He raised his blade in salute. "But I am Velthrin. I die as a warrior," he charged. Minho's rifle rose and fired once. Vrath fell, his blade still raised toward the sky. His death, instant and painless. The last Velthrin warrior had fallen. The combat trial was over. Silence fell across the battlefield. 47 humans stood among 8 Velthrin bodies. The cost had been uneven. 8 against 3 human casualties. But there was no celebration among the humans, no victory cries or displays of triumph. They had won, yes, but they had also taken lives. That was nothing to celebrate. The Council Keeper's voice echoed from orbit. "The combat trial is concluded. Victory to humanity. All rights and claims are transferred as per Council law. The warriors will be recovered and returned to their respective peoples." Across the galaxy, silence reigned. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak newcomers now saw them clearly. These were not fragile beings who had stumbled into space by accident. These were survivors who had weaponized 10,000 years of warfare against themselves and emerged ready to face anything the galaxy could offer. The scene shifted to the Grand Council chamber 3 days later. Taemin stood before the assembled representatives. The same chamber where this had all begun. But the atmosphere was completely different now. No species mocked the humans. No one questioned their right to claim worlds or speak in council debates. G1 activated the presentation behind Taemin. Images of human history filled the displays. Not propaganda, not manipulation, just facts. Timelines of human warfare stretching back to prehistory. Statistics of conflicts. 17 major wars in 1 century alone. Hundreds of smaller conflicts. Thousands of battles. Technological development, driven by military necessity. Cultural evolution, shaped by constant conflict. "This is what humanity is," Taemin said, his voice calm and factual. "We are not a warrior species by nature. We are a survivor species by necessity. For 10,000 years, we fought ourselves because we had no one else to fight. We learned every possible way to wage war because we needed every possible way to survive war. The Velthrin challenged us thinking we were soft. They were wrong. We are the hardest species in the galaxy because we have been forged in fires they cannot imagine." He paused, letting the images continue. Maps showing human nations, nearly 200 separate governments on one world. Cultural diversity that encompassed thousands of languages, religions, and traditions, all existing on a single planet. All having fought each other at one point or another. all having learned to coexist through bitter experience. The Velthrin have fought 17 species in 200 years, G1 added, bringing up comparative data. Humans fought themselves in 17 separate major conflicts just in the 20th century. We mastered warfare not against aliens, but against each other. Every tactic the Velthrin faced in the trial was developed by humans fighting humans. We know these techniques because we invented them, refined them, and survived them. The council chamber was silent. Representatives processed this information, understanding dawning on faces that could show expression. Humanity was not dangerous because they were aggressive or violent by nature. They were dangerous because they had survived the most dangerous opponent imaginable: themselves. An elder representative from a species that had been spacefaring for 10,000 years spoke up. "Why did you offer surrender? You could have eliminated all Velthrin warriors." "That is the tradition of the combat trial," Minho, present as a witness, answered. "Because we are not monsters. We fight when we must. We kill when necessary. But we do not enjoy death. The Velthrin challenged us, yes. But they did so out of ignorance, not malice. They deserved the chance to survive their mistake." Another representative, from a species that prided itself on philosophy, asked, "What if other species challenge you now? What if they test humanity?" "As the Velthrin did," Taman smiled, that same small smile he had shown Vrath in this chamber weeks ago. "Then, they will learn the same lesson. We do not want war. We do not seek conflict. But we have survived 10,000 years of warfare against the most dangerous enemy imaginable. We will survive whatever the galaxy brings." Messages began arriving from across the galaxy. The Velthrin Empire sent a formal apology and a request for alliance. They wanted to learn from humanity, to understand these tactics that had defeated them so completely. Other warrior species sent similar requests. Species that had viewed humans as potential prey suddenly wanted them as allies, friends, partners. Over the following weeks, humanity's status in the galactic community transformed. They were no longer newcomers to be dismissed. They were recognized as what they truly were: the most adaptable and dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever seen. New council laws were proposed, debated, and passed. No species would challenge humanity to combat trial without extensive mediation first. Trade agreements favored human colonies, acknowledging the risk of conflict with Earth. 6 months after the trial, Minho returned to Arena 7. Not for combat, but for training. Young Velthrin warriors had requested human instructors to teach them new tactics. He stood in the same forest where he had ambushed Velthrin squads. But now he taught those same techniques to the next generation of Velthrin fighters. One young warrior, barely old enough to have completed basic training, asked, "How did you become so good at war?" Minho considered the question carefully. "We became good at war because we had to survive war. For thousands of years, humans killed humans. We learned every trick, every tactic, every method of warfare, not because we wanted to, but because those who did not learn died. We are good at war because our ancestors paid for that knowledge with their blood." The young warrior absorbed this, then asked another question. "Are you proud of this?" Minho was quiet for a long moment. "No, I am not proud that humans spent so long killing each other, but I am proud that we learned, that we adapted, that we survived, and I am proud that we now choose to protect rather than destroy. Being able to fight does not mean you must fight. That is the lesson we learned too late, but at least we learned it." Back on Earth, Taman stood in the Council's Earth Embassy, looking at a wall of messages from species across the galaxy. Requests for alliances, trade agreements, military partnerships, cultural exchanges. Humanity had proven itself not just capable, but wise in victory. That combination of strength and restraint made them valuable allies and respected members of the galactic community. G1 entered his office with a data pad. 3 more species have requested combat training programs. 2 want human military advisors. 5 are offering technology exchanges for tactical information. The galaxy has decided that if they cannot beat us, they want to learn from us. Taemin nodded. And what do we want? We want what we have always wanted, Ji-won replied. To survive, to thrive, to protect our people. The difference is, now the galaxy knows we can do all 3. On the colony world of Kepler 442b, the 3,000 humans, who had been the cause of this entire conflict, lived peacefully. Children played in parks, built on mineral-rich soil. Adults worked jobs in mining, agriculture, and administration. They knew their world had been the center of galactic attention, that warriors had died to defend their right to be there, but they also knew they were safe, protected by the knowledge that humanity had proven itself. In orbit above Arena 7, the Council maintained a memorial. 8 Velthrin warriors who had died with honor. 3 human warriors who had fallen in service to their species. The memorial bore an inscription in every galactic language. They fought so others could understand peace. Years later, when new species joined the galactic community, they would be shown the recordings of the combat trial. Not as entertainment, but as education. They would watch humans systematically dismantle a warrior race through superior tactics, adaptation, and intelligence. They would see the offer of mercy, the respect shown to fallen enemies, the restraint demonstrated in victory, and they would learn the most important lesson of all. Never challenge humanity lightly. Not because humans are cruel or violent, but because they are survivors who learned to weaponize their own mortality. They are a species that spent 10,000 years fighting themselves and emerged ready to face anything the universe could offer. The galaxy had issued a challenge. Humanity had answered, and in answering, they had shown the cosmos something it had never seen before. A species that was lethal not despite their compassion, but because of it. Warriors who knew when to fight and when to stop. Survivors who chose to protect rather than destroy. Well done, the galaxy had said mockingly. You just challenged the Galactic Council's most lethal species. They had no idea how right they were.